Promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll. Kroller, how are you, buddy?
Great, Weave. Another beautiful night here in suburban Philadelphia.
We're actually taping on a Saturday morning, which is unique for us. I already drank too much coffee, so maybe I could be more irritable than ever.
Then I may have to leave.
All right, so we got a great show planned, as always. And just a reminder for our new listeners, there's 6 other episodes prior to this one. Please go back and take a gander at some of the other episode titles and pick your favorite one. Give it a listen, and hopefully you'll listen to 5 or 6 more, and then you'll become a subscriber. And please tell a friend. Share it on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. We're trying to build our audience.
Did you say Facebook?
Bracebook? No, I think I said Facebook, but maybe I didn't.
Facebook.
I didn't
your
enunciate.
jitters might be starting already.
Oh, boy. But just to review what we're going to do today, we have our Idiot of the Week award. I'm going to be giving some names to Rich. Then we're going to talk about immigration and some of the nuances around that, both legal and illegal immigration. Very controversial subject in the news a lot. And then we're going to try something at the end of the show, Rich. My creative mind has come up with a new segment called Idiotic Tweets. And,
wow, you're like a young Leonardo da Vinci with your creativity.
But just for the listeners, make sure you stay tuned. So essentially what I'm going to do is read some idiotic tweets anonymously, and I'm going to give Rich 3 choices of potential authors of those idiotic tweets. And my guess is he'll probably elaborate on how he feels about some of those choices, but we'll see how that goes. Should be fun.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun. Okay, so the first part of the show is our weekly Idiot of the Week awards. And Kroller, today, since there's idiots all over the world, I went international today with 2 nominees.
Nice.
Yeah, a little different. So the first one is a New Zealand man who admitted in court that he tricked a woman into having sex with him by telling her he had been poisoned and would die within 48 hours unless she did so. Us guys have all the moves, but this is a unique one. So listen.
I thought I heard them all. This might be a great tactic when I was a young teenager.
So my idiot, by the way, is the woman, and you'll see in a second. The 24-year-old con artist pleaded guilty Friday to sexual connection induced by threat in the district court. According to the New Zealand Herald, which cited multiple police reports and witnesses, the scam worked like this. The man, who was not identified, showed up at the woman's house, red-faced and bent over, and told her he had been beaten up and forced to drink a vial of poison. That there was no anecdote, and the only way to cure was to sweat out the toxins within 48 hours by having sex.
Wow.
She suggested, why doesn't he go for a brisk job to sweat? And he said it can only be cured in a particular way. And in particular, she had to have perform, well, we won't go into detail, it's a TV 14 show, but perform some sexual acts and have intercourse 3 times within 48 hours. Police said she consented in order to save the man's life.
Wow.
So my idiot is well, the guy is an idiot obviously too, but a bigger idiot is this woman who believed this story.
I thought I've heard every line in the book. This is new for me.
All right, so nominee number 2. A woman in Spain died after undergoing a supposedly routine bee acupuncture treatment and suffered an allergic reaction that put her into a coma. The alternative medicine procedure is more or less what its name conjures up. Instead of a needle, an acupuncture practitioner injects bee venom into the body with live bees stinging her. Unfortunately, she developed wheezing, dyspnea, I don't even know what that is, dyspnea, and a sudden loss of consciousness, and later fell into a coma and died.
I've often thought you had dyspnea in my...
Dyspnea. Dyspnea.
So she didn't
I don't know what that is, but
she
fell
clearly
into it.
didn't know she was allergic to bee stings, which a lot of people are.
So those are the two international nominees for Idiot of the Week. What are your thoughts?
Well, in the first case, she was clearly trying to save a man's life, but the fact that you would fall for that is mind-blowing, especially in today's world where, we're all warned about unsolicited sex and sexual harassment and,
How about the guy? He went to a lot of trouble. I mean, couldn't you just go on one of the social media apps and hook up with a girl? He shows up red-faced and bent over and concocts this huge story.
Well, I'd actually like to know more about this story. How did he pick her out? How did he identify her? Did she know she was? Did he know
I
she
don't
was
have
a
that
wacko?
level of detail. I'm sorry.
So she's pretty idiotic in that case. Now the woman, listen, there's so many medical procedures that people go through to improve their whatever, their looks. Yeah, it's amazing what people will do as far as piercings and tattoos and plastic surgery and altering this and their nose and their cheeks and even the color of their skin. So this is a tough one because if you don't know you're allergic to bees, and if you didn't realize that if you were
Having
allergic
live
to
bees,
bees, that
admitting
this
to having live bees sting you as part of your acupuncture.
and I can't vote for a tie in this case.
No, you got to pick one.
All right, I'm going to say the poor woman was trying to fix herself, didn't know she was allergic to bees. That's just a big mistake. The woman who falls for having to have sex 3 times in 48 hours to save a man's life, who walked in off the street, is one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard, actually. She might move to
She's
the top
in first place,
for Idiot of the Year. Especially,
replacing Donald Trump in my mind, maybe.
especially what we're trying to teach our young women and our daughters, and with all the sexual harassment and scams in the world. That's just amazing.
Okay, so she's our Idiot of the Week winner, and you have to write her a $1 check, and that's an insult in and of itself. You have to pay her.
I may write 99 cents. She won't get the full $1.
Oh boy. Okay, so we're going to move on to our main topic of the day, which is immigration. And, I thought we'd start with it's been a lot in the news, immigration, in particular illegal immigration, but I thought I'd give our listeners just a little brief history of how this country evolved through immigration. I think most people understand and agree that we are a nation of immigrants. For the first 100 years or so of this country, the U.S. facilitated immigration. Most of that came from the British Isles. And then around the 1800s, British Isles was mostly Protestant. Then the Irish and the Germans started coming in. They were mostly Catholic. Later in the late 1800s, early 1900s, more of Southern Europe started to come in. And that's when quotas started to go into effect. 1965 is the big inflection point, and that's where qualitative restrictions really started to come into play. And the national origin preference from Europe was dropped. And that's when you started to see people from Latin America and East Asia and Asia coming in. And that's today, more people come in from Latin America and South America and Asia than Europe. Today, there are estimated about 34 million immigrants. And by law, there's about 675,000 annually. And the emphasis is on family reunification. So that's kind of like the brief history of how we got to where we are now. There's an estimate of about 12 million illegal immigrants, and I know we're going to talk a lot about that. But what are your thoughts on that before we talk about the history part of it, before we talk about, kind of current day immigration problems?
Well, again, we talk about common sense and what was appropriate at one time, the changes. The United States of America is still the melting pot of the world. And this country was founded on immigration, right? Other than the Native Americans who owned and lived, in the land, we wouldn't be a country or the great country that we are without all the immigrants coming in, as you mentioned, over hundreds of years. And it started way before that, right? It actually started with the Vikings maybe 800, 900 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Right.
Christopher Columbus.
I'm just talking about since our
Right.
the government was founded.
Christopher Columbus gets way too much credit. We could do a show on him.
Right.
But, we were founded on folks from England, Scotland, Wales, Portugal, Spain, Germany, Poland, Ireland, Italy, on and on, coming over here. So, in one sense, you have to be a fan of immigration, but I think what's happening now is the immigrants, especially illegal immigrants or illegal aliens or refugees, are getting a lot of the credit, right or wrong, for crimes committed in the U.S., and that's where the big debate then kind of delineates.
Right, and so there's a few angles that this discussion could go. One is certainly illegal immigrants, and do they truly represent a disproportionate share of the crime? I have some stats that refute that. The other thing I do want to talk about and get your feeling on is DACA, which is it's an acronym for Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals. And they sometimes are referred to in the media as dreamers. And essentially, these are the kids of illegals that have been brought here by their parents, and to no fault of their own, they're here. And so there's about 800,000 dreamers, they believe. It's an estimate because it's hard to track.
What is DACA?
DACA is Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals.
Who makes up these acronyms and these,
Our lovely government. This was a program put in by Obama, and essentially this was, hey, we're not gonna get rid of these folks, even though according to the law they're here illegally. And Trump, of course, has threatened to pull back on this action and take a harder stance. But just more broadly, what do you feel about that? I mean, do you feel that kids of illegals should be sent packing?
I always say this to you, my wife, everybody I know. We have no control of who our parents are. Zero say in who we are, where we're born, who we're born to. So I hate to penalize unborn fetuses, for the actions of their parents. So I don't know that I would just take down illegal children from illegal immigrants. That's a tough one. I guess we're trying to lump things together, and we have to deal with generalities and mass decisions. But I also think the numbers might be higher, Mark. I mean, some of the statistics I saw, this is also a tough category because it's so tough to measure.
Right.
The statistics are so all over the place. There's not, one board or one group or one agency. It's, it's a lot of
the other reality
info.
The other reality is that if you're here illegally, you're less likely to report and be counted in a survey and stuff like that. So it is hard to survey illegals because by their nature, they're trying to remain under the radar.
Yeah, it's so hard to quantify. I mean, one statistic I read said that immigrants and their U.S.-born children now are roughly 86 million. So some surveys say, or studies, that immigrants represent 27% of the overall U.S. population. And it's grown dramatically, right, from the statistics I looked, 1970, 80, 90, 2000, 2010 till now. It has quintupled. Do you know what quintupled means?
I do.
So there you have it. It's
five times, correct?
That is correct. I didn't say. If I said septuple, would you know what that means?
I would. 7 times.
You see, you're not as bad at math as I thought. So the thing about immigration is it's growing, right? And certain parts of the United States are becoming more ethnic. Southern California, Texas, Florida, and it's the old adage, press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish. Is that a good or bad thing? I never looked at it as bad until you start to address, is it bad with the crime statistics? So,
well, I have some crime statistics, and this is something you'll never hear on Fox News and Breitbart and all these conservative stations and outlets. Here's the reality is native-born Americans represent 83% of the population. And again, the statistics are maybe disputed a little bit, but generally 83% of the population. They represent 92% of the prison population. For legal immigrants, they represent 8% of the population and 3% of the prison population. And lastly, illegal immigrants, 9% of the population and 5% of the prison population. So in each case, legal or illegal immigrants, they represent less of the prison population than they do of the overall population. And native-born Americans are much more likely to be incarcerated. So this is BS that the conservative outlets are preaching that, that illegals are more crime-ridden. You can always find anecdotal examples of illegals that are here and they murder someone or they commit crimes. But in the aggregate, it's actually the native-born people that are much more dangerous.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because this is a topic that perception alone, without diving into the statistics or the information, I thought was becoming a problem just based on the media or based on what I'm hearing from Trump or anybody that's proposing, we need to build a wall or we need to do put together tougher programs to prevent people coming in.
The ICE force, the ICE immigration, whatever, I forget what ICE stands for, but they're basically the people that go rouse these people out of their house and kick them out.
Right. People coming in through Mexico, people coming down through Canada. I started believing, wow, this sounds like a problem. And then, I do think it's publicized more often than not when someone's murdered or raped or there's illegal guns brought in or illegal drugs. It's highlighted that, this was done by an illegal immigrant. Right. And the perception is, wow, this must be very prevalent and taking place. But maybe for every one time that happens, there's 50 other crimes committed by an indigenous U.S. citizen.
Right. Yeah. And that doesn't sell on Fox News. Fox News viewers want to blame the immigrants. And, I have Irish heritage. I know that you have a different heritage. But throughout history, the new arrivals have been the scapegoats. And there was an experiment done about a month ago where a guy set up a bar. It was a mock thing to get reaction to people, but it was on St. Paddy's Day, and I think it was in Chicago, and he actually used the rules that were in place in Chicago back in the 1920s about Irish people. And he said, no, if you were Irish, you couldn't come in. And this was commonplace in our history. The Jews were, of course, persecuted. Japanese were interned during the war by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, there's all kinds of discrimination and bias against the most recent immigrants. And now it's Mexico, of course, when Trump took over, it's gotten worse.
Well, hey, the United States is still the land of opportunity, unless I just broke a microaggressionist rule.
You love that, don't you?
That still sticks in my mind. So
3 shows ago, go back and listen.
Most people that are living in impoverished countries, persecuted countries, oppressed countries, communist countries want to get out. And where do they want to go? Well, you have maybe a handful of choices. And the United States is at the top of that.
Right.
And there's obviously Canada, Australia, New Zealand, whatever. But the majority of people say, hey, if I'm going to make a new life for myself and my family, let's go to the land of opportunity, the U.S. So it's still the case. It's still an attractive place to end up. I think we also need to distinguish between immigrants and refugees.
Yep.
Right? Because now, a hot topic is refugees. And refugees are defined as someone who has been forced to flee his or her home country. And you can apply for asylum in the United States, but that's a process that's even more difficult than applying for a legal citizenship. So maybe a lot of the crimes are actually that are so-called being taking place with illegal immigrants are actually being done by refugees, because add refugees to the total size of immigration. But to your point earlier, hey, look, my grandparents or great-grandparents came over from Poland and Austria. So most of the folks today have grandparents or great-grandparents that did immigrate.
When you go out from it, emigrate. When you come, the people coming in are immigrants.
Great.
I believe.
Thank you for defining M versus M. So, hey, we have a very close connection. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for immigrants who emigrated.
And we wouldn't have all those good Polish jokes either.
No, I'll tell you what, Polish are some of the toughest, greatest athletes in the world. They just got a bad rap all those years.
Okay, so in our remaining minutes on this topic, I'd like to get your position on sanctuary cities. So I have a libertine slant on sanctuary cities, but that's also in the news a lot, and especially the conservative media outlets blast sanctuary cities. Our home city, Philadelphia, is one. There's San Francisco. There's many of them. But any thoughts on sanctuary cities?
I have a bit of a problem with it because some of the sanctuary cities I've seen in the news over the last several years sometimes denounce the very country they fled to, or by desire wanted to be here. I've seen some Islam sanctuary cities, and they're burning an American flag. There was somewhere in the Midwest, maybe Wisconsin, and or during 9/11, you saw certain groups in protected areas or culturally protected areas due to numbers burning and denouncing the U.S. flag in the U.S. I'm like, well, then what the heck are you doing here? So I think that could create some problems if we create little mini Vatican cities, whatever ethnicity, if it's not going to be pro-U.S. and contributing to the success of the country.
Well, of course, the main beef of conservatives out there is that the cities are choosing which laws they want to follow and which not. And of course, conservative politicians, I think, are also hypocrites. And by the way, it goes both ways because the marijuana laws are localized in many cases or states' rights based. And yet the progressives want the states to be free to have open marijuana laws or free legalize marijuana, but they don't want it if on the reverse. So my point is that whether it's education or marijuana laws or other gun laws that are localized, we have a federalism system and states' rights, and I think it should be up to the local governments to decide what's best for the people that choose to live there. And my vision is, if a California is a liberal place to live, well, the people that want to have more liberal laws, then they go live there. Or if Texas is conservative and you like those laws better, you can go live there. And so I'm for de-emphasizing the federal government and let the states' rights, have the kind of laws that they see fit, and that even goes down to the city level. And so if a sanctuary city in Philadelphia, if the people of Philadelphia want to be more liberal when it comes to some of these issues, then so be it. I know I'm probably not in the majority with that.
Yeah, I would think you're not. I mean, here's the bottom line.
People are law abiders. I'm not.
Yeah, no, you've never been, especially driving your fast cars. Here's the bottom line. I think the topic today is, are illegal immigrants or refugees causing more crimes proportionally than our fellow native citizens? And if they are, then what do we do to strengthen the borders, whether Mexico or Canada? Hence, the wall discussion. Let's build a wall like the Great Wall of China, for $500 billion. But what is that? Are we going to get the return on investment there? It doesn't make sense. I'm starting to believe that illegal immigrant crimes are not nearly as prevalent as we thought. I think the other issue is, are illegal immigrants taking away jobs from U.S. citizens?
That's
ridiculous. Are illegal immigrants dipping into free medical help or free insurance, that's impacting us? Again, if it's such a small percentage, probably not. But I agree with Trump on this case. I don't want an illegal criminal, not just illegal alien, illegal immigrant, bringing drugs into the country, child trafficking, illegal guns, and contributing to the crime problem we have. So,
but you concede that we native-borns are actually a bigger problem than that, right? Even though there are individual incidents of immigrants doing that, illegal immigrants doing
I now concede that after diving into this and not realizing it. But of course, if there's a way to prevent any additional crime, I'm all for it. I just don't know building a wall, makes sense.
Well, and not to mention the fact that the most recent funding bill provided, quote, border security funding, but not building a physical wall. So they're going to have all kind of electronic surveillance. And I think that's much more likely, ultimately, what Trump gets out of this is not a big, beautiful wall, as he would say, across a 1,100-mile border. I just don't think that's ever going to happen. People will find their way around it. They'll come in over the air. They'll come in through trucks. By sea, they'll find a way, and if they want to, restrict entry, I think they're going to have to do it through more sophisticated methods.
I'd rather take that massive funding and put it toward armed guards in our schools then, or some other thing that is a little easier to measure. So I want to prevent as much crime, whether it's illegal or legal. Is there actually a thing called legal crime?
But by the way, I did want to reference. There's one gentleman that's done a lot of work on this, and just to kind of sum it up, the immigrants are net contributors to our social safety net. So there's lots of wrong data out there that says that these people are draining our social safety net. They're coming here and they're going into our hospitals, they're on welfare, and they're collecting benefits without doing anything. And that, I'm sure that happens anecdotally in several situations, but on the whole, the data supports that illegal immigrants are actually contributing more to our economy, paying taxes and Social Security and stuff like that, than they're taking out. So there's a guy, Alex Norista at Cato, I'm not pronouncing it right, but at Cato Institute, he's done a lot of reference on that. So if you guys want to check that out, you can do that. So immigration, final thoughts before we move on.
Hey, the reality is you and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for immigrants who emigrated. So it's hard to take something that's worked for 300 years and now try to repeal it or pick out little partition areas and fix them. Yes, there are some issues. Yes, illegal immigration is an issue. But again, our country was founded on being the melting pot of the world, and all the collective thinking and cultures and diversity has made us what we are today.
Yeah, and I would only summarize by saying that look at what's going on in Japan and Europe and China even to some extent. If you don't have enough native-born population, your country will slowly die, and the older generation can't be supported by the younger generations paying taxes. So immigration is important to keep the social safety net financially viable and support an older population. And the countries that support immigration and have immigration policies and encourage it are the ones that typically thrive. And we want people that are largely talented people coming here and entrepreneurial and risk takers. They're generally the people that come here. They're the ones that our ancestors were. And I think that it bodes well for our population in the future by having a culture of entrepreneurship, hard work, and risk taking.
Then I'll say, instead of dilly dilly, DACA DACA.
DACA DACA. Okay, so we're going to move into our final segment, and we're going to call this Idiotic Tweets, and I think I've already explained. And I think this is particularly topical this week, Kohler, because Fox News host Laura Ingraham got in trouble this week with a stupid tweet where she, I think she grade shamed one of the Parkland kids, Parkland High School, where the shooting happened. She kind of grade shamed him, and she got her show boycotted, and the advertisers pulled out. So it got me thinking about what other stupid tweets are out there. So here's the first one, and I'm going to give you 3 choices of potential authors. So the first one, quote, "If we evolved from apes, why are there still apes?" Now, who wrote that, Rich? Was that Justin Bieber, Britney Spears, or Tim Allen?
Wow. So I would think Tim Allen's a pretty smart guy. I think Justin Bieber and Britney Spears might have the intelligence of a box of rocks.
They could probably have their own segment for Justin Bieber.
Gosh, well, here's the thing. I could plug in a lot of people who are that dumb, but I'm going to go with Justin Bieber.
That's a good choice. I probably would have chose that, but it was Tim Allen. And I don't know if you know anything about Tim Allen, but he's had a little checkered past. He's actually spent some time in jail. But he was quickly corrected on Twitter that we evolved, apes and humans evolved from a common ancestor, but not we didn't evolve from apes. We we apes and humans evolved from a common ancestor. So Tim Allen, you were the idiotic tweeter.
Wow, I'm very surprised at that one.
Okay, the next one. You'll get a kick out of this one. This is quote, "Cowabunga, dudettes. I'm so pumped to be on this surfing kick. Who else surfs out there? Gnarly day on the H2O, riding waves."
I want to throw up.
So who was that? Was that A, Gwyneth Paltrow, B, Kim Kardashian, or C, Selena Gomez?
I was originally going to say Bart Simpson.
No, because she says Cowabunga dudettes.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's definitely a woman.
Wow. So
And we all, I'm sure, these are all admired young ladies for our daughters to look up to. Gwyneth Paltrow, Selena Gomez, and Kim Kardashian. Boy, what a new Mount Rushmore.
So it sounds like somebody trying to be cool, and trying to be like Valley Girl cool.
Right.
It also sounds like somebody that would have to be young. I have a tough time believing Gwyneth Paltrow or Kim Kardashian would. It just sounds like a teenager. So I'm going to go with Selena Gomez.
No, it's actually Kim Kardashian, and she's not exactly my favorite. She's done a lot of dumb tweeting, and of course, her and is it Kanye? She's married to?
Kanye.
Oh boy, I mean, we could do a whole show with stupid stuff that they've done, but no, that was Kim Kardashian. Her attempt to be who was the guy from Sean Penn, I guess, from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, talking like a surfing dude.
Wow.
She was the female equivalent of that. Okay, so the last one. This is a little more up our alley, Rich. So, quote, "You will never last in the NFL with that attitude. The world doesn't revolve around you, boy. Hashtag Cam Newton." And that was either Bill Romanowski, David Duke, or Joe Theismann. And obviously, when you put boy at the end of a quote and hashtag Cam Newton, this was after his Super Bowl pouting when he lost a couple of years ago. But this tweet was quickly deleted, but they did capture it. So who do you think made that stupid tweet?
It's interesting how one simple word can completely change the dynamics of a tweet to go from whatever to pretty harshly racial.
Yeah.
And once you go that route, you're in trouble.
Right.
So could be any one of those three guys. But, who's the most fired up, aggressive person in that group? Probably Romanowski.
Exactly right. And you probably know some stories, but Bill Romanowski was the author of that. He's basically crazy. I mean, he was crazy when he played. There was all kinds of stories we don't have time to go into, but I guess he played at Boston College, right? And he was
Boston College.
He was a maniac.
49ers. I think he even spent some time here in Philly.
Right. He was
steroid.
I think he was from here, wasn't he?
Steroid guy. I'm not sure where he's from.
I thought he was local. Maybe he was from New England. But yeah, Bill Romanowski was the author of that tweet, and he was quickly condemned, as he should be. But, I mean, that doesn't change the fact that Cam Newton was pouting, and he does have a poor attitude, and a lot of people don't like his attitude. But you just can't go and put the boy on there. That's just way over the line.
This is a big problem I see with Twitter in general, right? This reminds me, tweeting is like a person behind the wheel of a car. Right? All of a sudden, I don't care if you're a 4-foot woman, a 90-year-old man, or some
Keyboard muscles.
It's amazing the tailgating and the non-yielding and the beeping and giving people the finger when they were wrong. It's steering wheel muscles, and Twitter gives people muscles that they don't have to be accountable for until they do stupid stuff like that. So I'm sure this will never end. It's another pet peeve of mine, stupid tweets.
Okay. Well, good. That was a new segment. That was fun. So maybe we'll try to do that again in the future.
You're a fun guy.
Yeah, I'm really fun. Yeah, that's what I'm known for. Fun with Economics by Mark Weaver. All right. So final comments before we adjourn.
That's a tough topic, immigration. It can go in 45 different directions. But I'm telling you, I'm starting to change my tune a little bit. And
I'm working on you with a libertarian thing. Maybe
I'm slowly turning libertarian, I guess, right before your eyes.
40 more years and you'll get there.
I'll get there.
All right, so I'd like to remind our listeners to please share our episode on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, as we just were talking about, at Are We Idiots Show. And make sure you tune in next week. This was actually a suggestion from one of our listeners. We're going to talk about the lost work ethic. And I know Rich likes to go off on millennials. I happen to think that it's a bigger problem than millennials, but millennials have this laziness reputation. We're going to talk about all the lost work ethic issues next week, so make sure you tune in for that. And as always, remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.